Hello and welcome back inside the Parc Fermé for podcast number 810. This is Todd.
No, Todd, not now!
AKA Negative Camber. You know why I've asked you here. After races, what do we always do? You know what we do after races.
We watch one, then we talk about it. Then we watch one, then we talk about it. Come on, Todd.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do. But before doing that, I normally have to get somebody that knows actually what they're talking about when it comes to racing, because he is a professional race car driver. And I happen to know that he spent the last couple of days driving around quickly in Bentleys, no less, and Rolls-Royce.
Just Rolls-Royce. No,
Rolls-Royce, not Bentleys. Yeah, I knew that. Well, you know who it is.
Wrecked from out of the wasteland. He's bad, he's beautiful, he's crazy.
Hello, everybody. This is Paul Charles, the International.
Paul, you were driving Rolls-Royces for the last 2 days.
I know. Isn't that crazy?
It's a hard life, Paul.
That's a different beast, I'll tell you.
Yeah, was it a little tubby, a little heavy?
It's a little heavy, yeah, you're kind of sitting up. It's not really my cup of tea, I would tell you. It's a very sophisticated, obviously extremely expensive car, but I wouldn't buy one for myself.
Yeah, didn't rotate through the corners like you wanted it to.
No, you just don't do that with it. You just kind of drive.
It's for
touring. It's got like in the ceiling. It's got like a light show, like a star show with. Yeah, it's got every single bell, button, whistle you'd want. But
it's crazy.
You're
probably driving around a $200,000 car.
Oh, it was a lot more than that.
Wasn't $500,000 car?
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy.
You drive carefully when you're in Texas traffic, when you're driving $500,000 worth of Rolls Royce.
Everybody stay 40 feet away from me. That's crazy. Well, Paul, it's a tough life, but someone has to do it.
Someone has to do it.
And it might as well be you.
It may as well.
Yeah, why not? You deserve it. You're the International.
I do.
It's like I said on your post. You posted a picture of you at the Rolls, and I said, finally, a car worthy of the International.
Yes. But I was contemplating, what would I do with $500,000 if I
wouldn't be buying a Rolls? I can tell you that.
Buying a Rolls, no.
Nope, it wouldn't be that.
Something with an engine in the back, probably, I would imagine.
No, it'd be buying me a seat at like Williams or something. No.
There you go. That'll get me one race, maybe a test drive.
A reserve roll. You could be Daniel Ricciardo.
I could.
Yeah.
Yeah, watch out, Sergio. I'm after you.
That's exactly right. Keep your eye out. There's a new honey badger on the paddock named Paul Charsley.
Yeah.
Oh, my. Paul, well, this weekend, I don't want to be the bearer of bad tidings, and I hate to share this with all our listeners, but it was the final race of the season. And how sad is that? No more racing. The cold winter months are upon us. Ferrari stopped doing the Vroom event. There's nothing to live for, except that we don't stop. We keep producing content and podcasts all through the winter, so don't worry about it, folks. We gotcha. We got some fun coming up. I happen to know that Paul, Grace, and I are planning the first ever. We've threatened it for 15 years.
Yep.
The wine and cheese episode, which probably won't be much about wine and cheese, but it'll be the first ever podcast with the three of us talking about all kinds of stuff that's not related to F1.
Although that may sneak in the end. It's just in the habit, but we're going in it with general topics.
That's right. That's right.
Conversation.
Because the longer we go into that, Grace, she gets to drink a little bit. She's like, oh, screw you. Ralph Furman was the best driver at Jordan. Yeah. No, he wasn't. Heinz Harald Frentzen. No, Damon Hill. We may get into that.
Yep.
You never know.
It's definitely got to be some food involved,
Got to be some food.
People have questions. We'll give them answers.
That's right. And at the end of the day, Paul's going to beat us all down to a submission of saying, okay, fine. Jackie Stewart or maybe Ronnie Peterson, GOAT. That's
Yep. There you go.
That's where Paul, he ends up there.
And tacos are good on any night. It doesn't just have to be
it's not just Taco Tuesday, or as Paul calls it, Taco Tuesday.
Mm-hmm.
So, Paul, the English won the first game in the World Cup there.
They did, a bit of shooting fish in the barrel, but yes, a win is better. They've lost worse against worse opponents sometimes. So it's a good step. And what the US drew, did they?
Yeah, 1-1 with Wales. Yeah. Yeah. Apologies to the Welsh.
Yeah.
You know any Welsh people?
Do I? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
They're a hardy
They're
lot.
fun and crazy.
Yes, they're a hardy lot.
They're similar to the Scottish, but a little crazier.
Ah, nice.
I would say. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well,
the Scottish are probably a bit more violent, but the Welsh are a bit crazier.
Yeah, right.
Does that make sense?
It does. We're both Scot. Yes. Yes. Yeah. We do know that. But I got to say, I keep saying, as much as we have a lot of fun with the Kentians in Kent and your old stomping ground in Kent, if being a Missouri boy, if I lived in the UK, I'd probably be more at home in Cornwall than I would Kent.
Yes.
Is my guess. I think I'd
Have you seen the show about going to the countryside, the English show?
In Cornwall?
Yeah, well, they go to Cornwall a lot, but it's where people break out of their city life and they get a tour of what it would be like and try to look at houses in the countryside. I'm sorry. This is for the other podcast.
It is for the other podcast. Yeah, but we're talking about all
one
things
of my
UK
favorite
here.
shows. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I haven't seen that. I gotta watch it. You have to send me a link to it because I have to watch it. I love that stuff.
Yeah.
It's the same reason. Like you wouldn't catch me in Lycra on a bicycle, but I absolutely watch every day of the Tour de France. And the reason I do is because it's like a travel guide. You get to see all this stunning helicopter video of parts of France that I'll never go to in my life. It's great fun.
Never say never.
Yeah, so the World Cup, I don't know what's going on over there. The British press is having a heyday over there because they're all up in arms about Qatar. Nobody can drink beer, and there's something about armbands and all this stuff. I don't know what's going on over there, but I'm kind of thinking why is everybody so pissed off? You decided to have it in Qatar. I don't know.
Someone decided. I don't think if the fans spoke, I'm not sure anyone would have picked Qatar as the place they want to go. But much like some of the F1 races end up somewhere where most of the fans would not want to be. Right. I mean, remember the Korean Grand Prix, the classic?
Yes.
Yeah.
So remember the Vietnamese?
Yep. Oh. No, I can't remember.
Yeah. No, you're right.
Was I mean, F1 has done what the World Cup and a lot of these sporting events do. They sell themselves to the highest bidder.
So it's sports washing, as they call it, and that kind of thing. So you're right. I mean, it wasn't, it wasn't Nigel in Cheltenham that decided to go to Qatar. I can tell you that.
No, it wasn't.
Nigel's down there with a black and tan saying, "Oi, what are we doing?" So what him?
Yeah, I mean, and we definitely didn't have Abu Dhabi as the last F1 race because of the big insurgence of automotive, sporting world coming from that region. So.
Yeah, all the Abu Dhabi-ness that we so crave.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the last race in Abu Dhabi. Shall we talk about that?
Yeah.
It is podcast number 810. Did I say that? The Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, and we're going to cover that race tonight. So I know we're off to a slow start. Hang in there, man. If you think this is slow, wait till the winter, man. You're going to be thinking, why do I listen to that damn podcast? Good Lord, they talk for an hour and a half about nothing,
Yes. Yeah.
And that's what we do. So there you go. All right. So let's set the table for the race. We kind of typically do that. Well, look, Abu Dhabi, I understand your outrage. I get it because Abu Dhabi failed to offer the thrilling and controversial, as Paul might say, controversy, results of last year's race. But oddly, Paul, I saw no Michael Massey tribute helmets celebrating his retirement from F1. So I was looking for those, but Donka Massey.
He wasn't doing donuts. He was eating donuts.
Yeah, right. So there was that. There's no doubt that the friction of the Brazil Grand Prix lingered into the paddock like an unwanted fart. And it was hanging around in Abu Dhabi with Sergio Perez starting on the front row and how Max didn't help him. And after all the things I've done for you, right? You have Sergio. And so that dragged into the paddock, and hopes were high that he might be able to pull off and secure second in the Drivers' Championship. So that was running high. So you had Red Bull winning both drivers and constructors, Max winning drivers. Could we get Sergio to 2? It would be the first 1-2 in the Drivers' Championship that Red Bull's ever had. Can you believe that? All those dominating years, Vettel winning, all those 4 years, and Mark Webber adrift.
That is crazy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Considering one of those, Webber was in the lead of the championship going into the last race.
I know. Isn't that crazy? So Sergio Webered it. Mac Weber. Should I say Mac Weber? So the bigger question for the teams was really, would it be a one-stopper or a two-stopper? And some of that came down to the amount of fresh tires they had going into the race, right? Whether they were set prime for a two-stopper or one-stopper. In the case of Max, for example, he had one set of fresh hearts, where Sergio had two, so that may have lent to the splitting of strategies, so to speak. Another pressing element was really the teams weren't quite sure of the issue of tire degradation or how much degradation they would be having. And teams thought that there might be a lot more graining or degradation, but there was quite a bit of graining as well as overworking the tires, overheating them. And that seemed to be the real culprit, as Toto Wolff said after the race, that both his drivers cooked their tires in the first stint. So you had a lot of tire management, a lot of tire issues. It was one of those races, Paul, that was just on the cusp of that one or two stop strategy, which is always a kind of a weird window, when you get into that. Those that go, some that go for two stoppers totally doesn't work, and then it does with others, and some that do one stops don't work where it does for others. So it's a really weird window.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what they want to happen ultimately.
Yeah,
it just rarely does, right?
Damn you, Pirelli. Yeah, right. Yeah, they scripted it. It's a fraud. They wanted you to do that, to do a two stop or one stop or not know. So it was. Let's see. Sunday's race wasn't as excited as I mentioned as the final race, but there was some good midfield battles. I thought I enjoyed some of the racing out there. I thought some of it was pretty good. The weekend was also, Paul, as you would imagine, the weekend was ripe. I mean, ripe with lots of Danke Seb events, parties, features, celebration, vignettes, videos, special memoriams for the four-time champion. This four-time champion who went from, mind you, I've watched Seb's entire career from those new to F1, he went from charming young 19-year-old lad who the British press loved because he was a big Monty Python fan, loved British humor, and they adored him, and then all of a sudden they hated his guts. The wagging of the one finger, the clashes with Lewis Hamilton, how dare you, they hated him. And then a couple of years ago, he got punted out of Ferrari. He's over to Aston Martin. Then we get the kinder, gentler Seb, the activist Seb, and now the world loves Seb. And they had a great going away, a great sending off weekend for Seb to commemorate his 15 years in the sport. And I thought it was wonderful, all of the accolades that they gave him.
No, it was great and well deserved, I would say.
Yeah,
as you say, they loved him, they hated him, then they loved him all over again. He grew a little pot belly and a little beard and lost a little hair, and now he's all lovable.
He's lovable.
That's why I'm wearing my Seb Aston Martin green today. Just
right.
because of that. So
right. I thought you were describing me there for a minute. That happened to me, but I'm not as lovable as he is.
No. Sorry about that.
I know. Some things just don't pan out. Yeah, like your
wife loves you. That's the main thing.
She tolerates me, but yeah, that's true. So there you go. So you had Seb this weekend. Speaking of departures,
there was a lot of hellos and goodbyes, wasn't there?
Well, that's just it. So this weekend saw the backs of Sebastian Vettel, Nicholas Latifi, Mick Schumacher, Daniel Ricciardo, all of those gents on the way out, some more positive than others, I might add.
Not
they were
work here anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Not gonna work here. So with Seb, it was all love and hugs, and thanks so much for what you've done, Seb. Right, which is completely apropos. But others, not so much. It was like Dan shrinking off into the oblivion, and no one really knows. And then Red Bull. I know Red Bull tried to throw him a bone. And they announced it kind of like the day before and said, yeah, he's going to be joining Red Bull. They're trying to throw him a bone, but then he was kind of like, yeah, well, maybe, I haven't signed anything. So that was weird. And I think the weirdest for me, Paul, was the Haas parting with Mick Schumacher. After the race, when Seb was doing donuts and they were doing donuts and Daniel was doing donuts. And so Mick went over and started doing donuts. They jumped on the radio and said, no, Mick, hey, no donuts. We can't do that. Come on, man. Bring it back to the garage. No donuts. We're not doing that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was humiliating. You
Yeah.
know? That's a shame.
Mm-hmm.
So, can we talk about Gunther yet, or is he still a rock star on Drive to Survive, and we can't be critical?
I know he swears, so he's lovable also
He's
because
lovable.
he swears so much.
Yeah, I'm just going to tell you, folks, that when the team's doing poorly, you don't fire the entire team.
Yeah.
Let me just leave that there. I'll let you figure the math out. All right, let's talk about the race, shall we? Let's start at the sharp end of the grid at the top of the podium with Red Bull. Sergio Perez ends up in P3, Max Verstappen P1. Max had a good start, led comfortably from start to finish in a dominant performance that really kind of put a cap on a very dominant season, let's be honest. For Max, it was down to tire management for him. He was on that one stopper, and at some point I was wondering, and even texted my dear friend Paul. Do you know him? You should. No.
Just don't text me.
The thing about Paul is many people know of Paul, but few people know Paul. So I was thinking towards the waning laps, last 10 laps, I was thinking, would Red Bull risk it and ask Max to back off in order to push Leclerc back into the striking range of Sergio? But as Paul so rightfully said, and I think it was borne out, he said, he didn't think that they would want the drama and outrage at that point. And, I agree with you. And I think that's ultimately what Max said too, is that good driving, right? And so it was interesting because here you got a team that's won the Constructors, won the Drivers' Championship, won the Constructors last year, irrespective of a dodgy call or whatever. They didn't do anything wrong. They just ran it. And then you got the whole cheating scandal and the anti-Max, whoa, he's such a selfish, and the Brazil and all this stuff. And it was really, I can't recall, Paul, a team winning both titles and being asked to feel guilty about it. Right. And about their achievements. I can't recall that since maybe what, Paul? Benetton, maybe?
Benetton. Oh, with the traction control.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. and the purposely hitting Damon or JV or.
Well, that's for sure. Don't get me started on that one.
Yeah, I know. See.
Yeah.
That's why you hear old fans of Formula One, veterans saying, Schumacher, 7 titles, but there's asterisks. That's what you get that. So anyway, so that was weird. But having said that, it wasn't a time to back off anyway. Let's be honest. The real opportunity would have been after Sergio's stop when he was behind Max, who was on a 1-stopper. Sergio was on a 2-stopper, was kind of closing in. That would have been the time to let Sergio pass. But he then may have even turned that 2-stopper into a win. And I'm not sure Red Bull were prepared to do that either, right?
Yeah.
So on the outside looking in, I kind of feel like just took the punch in the nose and lost second in the Drivers' Championship just because they weren't really up for a bunch of outrage.
Yeah. I mean, there's many ways to skin the cat, quite honestly, right? I mean, if from the get-go it was Max, our goal here is to give Sergio second place in the championship, you would have done it all kinds of different ways than doing it the way that they would have had to do it at the end. I mean, I think it would have been kind of fun if they'd have pitted Max and Sergio around the same time and had Max go after Charles. And that would have ultimately been a lot more cleaner of way of holding Charles and getting in his way and slowing him down, letting Sergio get by, right? Yeah. So, I mean, Max definitely had the pace in his hand to do that. So they had options. They chose not to use them, and I think they just kind of let Sergio try and win that spot for himself. And he had opportunity. He still had an opportunity to do it. I mean, there was a couple of mistakes there that he did during the race, and every driver's making mistakes. And you think about those 0.2, that half a second here or that bad call here at the end of a race if it didn't quite go the way you wanted it to for a long time, and analyze and learn from it. And there's, as I said, the deal with Sergio getting by Vettel and passed him in that first DRS zone rather than the second one, really, that knocked about 3 seconds off of his pace. And then you look at how close Sergio was at the end, within 2 seconds. That mistake, it was still in, let's just say it was still in Sergio's hands that he could have still beaten Leclerc, even under this strategy, but he did make some errors, and that hurt him and didn't give him a chance to pounce at the end. But also Red Bull, if their goal had really been this is Sergio's day, they could have also manipulated it many different ways because they had pace in hand anyway.
Yeah, it was Hamilton that he waited. He passed Hamilton in the first DRS. Hamilton knew it and let him by.
Okay.
And the wily veteran that Hamilton is, he waited for that second DRS and nailed him back. Right. And then the next lap, sort of was like, oh, damn. Yeah, I don't want to pass him in the first DRS zone. It's the second one, which is what he did. But yeah, from Sergio, he was desperately trying to take second in the driver's title, needed help, but not getting around Max, kind of hurt. And then, as you mentioned, some slight errors on his part. He just ran out of laps to catch Charles's Ferrari. Now you can get mad at all the things Max didn't do in Brazil, but the reality is, had he ceded that position in Brazil, it wouldn't have covered Leclerc's second place.
Yeah, it wouldn't have, but it would have had a different tilt on the weekend for
may have
Ferrari.
And had prompted a different strategy, right?
Right, exactly. I think if he had, I think things would have been a little different for Sergio. And as you say, Ferrari would have had to react and plan differently. All they had to do was be ahead of Sergio. If that wasn't the case, they had to maybe think of doing something different. So I think it did have effects on it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Good point. I didn't think that because I'm not a professional. So I don't think like that, I don't think like a sporting manager of a professional racing team. That may come as a surprise to you, Paul. But no, it's a good point. If he'd had a point in hand, yes, then it would have been a little more challenging. So anyway, Sergio, I mean, at the bottom line, Sergio, look, you can go back, and it's a little bit like, Red Bull argued last year, so I don't want to beat a dead horse. But, I mean, Sergio was in the fastest car on the grid all season long, right? Yeah. And a lot of it was really up to him to win second. Yeah. And yes, teammates can support each other, no doubt about it. But to Max's point, how good would it have looked if he'd have backed all the way up and backed Charles up?
It wouldn't have been good. I wouldn't have enjoyed that side of it. If it's close just because it's naturally close, then that's one thing. But for one thing to back up 5 seconds and then just start driving a white car, I think that would have been
right. And if you're wondering what that looks like, if you're newer to Formula One, you veterans will know 2016 immediately jumps to mind, the last race of the season, with Lewis Hamilton almost slowed to a crawl, leading the race with his teammate Rosberg behind him, trying to back Rosberg up into the danger zone with Vettel behind Rosberg, because if Rosberg would have lost that one position, he wouldn't have won the title, right?
Yeah, but that I didn't have as big an issue with because he was doing it for his own gain, right?
Yeah.
I think it's different if you're fighting someone for a championship or a championship position, and someone else is getting in the middle of it, but Hamilton was trying, I don't have as big an issue with that.
Right. So anyway, go look it up. You'll see that where they were following and Lewis slowed down, and then Rosberg's trying to go around, but Lewis making this car very wide, right? Anyway, but that's kind of what that looks like when you talk about backing a car up. It's been done time immemorial, so Lewis didn't invent that.
But I will say that I think Sergio is going to be a different wingman next year.
Might very well be.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I think I said it on the last podcast. It's like it's not necessary. You won't be able to quantify it or pick it out.
Yeah,
but I don't think he's going to go to the extremes he did to help Max.
Right, like last year. Yeah. I agree. I think there's going to be a limit. Maybe. And the good news is maybe Red Bull's got Daniel Ricciardo, who has no limit and will back Max up. I doubt it. Anyway, so that's how Red Bull. Let's talk about Ferrari, because that's always fun to talk about. No! Ferrari, Charles Leclerc, P2, Carlos Sainz, P4. And for the dude that left the really snide comment on our YouTube channel that hates the soundboard and thinks Grace hates it too. Grace doesn't hate the soundboard. And if you don't, honestly, there's lots of other podcasts you can listen to. So Carlos in P4, Charles in P2. Carlos didn't get the best of starts, was battling with Lewis on the initial laps. with Lewis running wide and giving the place back, but then easily passing Carlos again under DRS. Eventually, though, Carlos got back around Lewis. Did struggle with his tires, said that he kind of chewed his tires up quite a bit in that Lewis battle, and that basically hurt his pace, his two-stopper. But the two-stopper did allow him then to get back out, fresher tires, claw his way back up, got back up to fourth, and finished there. So, I don't think Carlos felt like all was lost. I think he felt like it was there or thereabouts. I think he chewed his tires up in first stint that kind of put him in the position he was in, but the two-stopper gave him a chance to get back up to fourth. I think he was happy with it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, unfortunately, once you've taken that edge off the tire, you can't bring it back. So you're kind of sitting there paying the penalty lap after lap after lap. So to have the opportunity to come back from it was probably like a breath of fresh air. And ultimately it wasn't, this race for Carlos really didn't mean a whole hell of a lot. And I think, just Ferrari in general, their pace in the race was actually probably better than they were expecting.
Yeah.
So everything was kind of a bonus at this race for Ferrari, because
I agree.
Like they were in the mix. Really, I thought actually Mercedes were going to be fighting it with the Red Bulls, but that just didn't materialize at all.
Yeah, it didn't really come to fruition, and Ferrari was thereabouts.
Yeah,
Charles was running at Sergio's heels for most of the day, and then and the team, let's be fair, known for occasionally getting strategy errors, right, and getting strategy wrong. They made a dummy call, kept Charles out on a one-stopper, brought it home in second, securing second in the driver's title. A great result for him. So the good result from Carlos and Charles kept Ferrari ahead of Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship. And to be fair, the team did seem like, they've kind of worked hard on a few of those details, I would say, in the last 3 or 4 races, and tried to get strategy improved and get some of those things. Now, the race and the track may not have always flattered the Ferrari, but it kind of manifests itself here in a good strategy call and a good race and a good result for Charles. I mean, Charles said on balance that they didn't have the pace to beat the Red Bulls outright, but by applying pressure at the right time and the right strategy, they were able to hold on for a good result. And, Paul, why not? This is the guy who led the championship early on. So second place in the drivers.
So long ago, yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice consolation prize.
Yeah, I think, it's not season review, but I think overall Ferrari should be pretty happy with how this season ended. They had their ups and downs, and Charles, they were in the catbird seat for a while there for sure, but fell back. But when we also remember how far they were down a couple of years ago, the change of the rules, etc., I think it's benefited them. They've kind of shot themselves in the foot half the time when they did have the pace. But this is not one of those occasions. And what I really appreciate is that they literally, walked into Abu Dhabi on Thursday and came out with this plan, and they sacrificed some qualifying pace, etc., to work on making that chassis work on the tires, so that this plan maybe was their only shot, but they did execute it perfectly. As I say, it goes all the way back to the practices and running on full tanks and seeing how the tires worked, etc., rather than chasing lap time. And that's definitely a philosophy we have in our IMSA team. So it really does benefit in the race. It's just not as glamorous, with the qualifying and everything. But it can really pay dividends in the end if you don't have the car to beat someone on a straight out fight.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And so as a long-suffering Ferrari fan, it was a good result to see, that all come together. And even Charles, there was a moment where he was questioning whether this is the right strategy, but it was.
Yeah, I guess we can't believe any of their plan A, B, or C calls anymore. Huh?
Yeah. Okay, so plan M. Okay. So, all right, let's talk about Mercedes.
Get in there, Lewis.
You've got Lewis Hamilton, a rare DNF. I think Crofty said it was the first mechanical DNF of the season, which is pretty bizarre.
Yeah.
And, that it would happen to Lewis is just like indicative of a very tough season he's had. George Russell up in P5. Lewis had a good start and was really battling up front with Carlos early on. Now, he ran wide, and when he did that, he launched his car over the sausage curbs. I mean, all four wheels were off, and
Yeah.
it was amazing he was able to continue. But it did
Hmm.
leave me wondering. I'm sure people watching wondering, oh my gosh, did he damage that car? And I think he was wondering the same. He was radioing, it felt weird and didn't really feel exactly 100%, and some question about whether he damaged some underfloor or what it
Right.
was, but he kept going. Now he dropped back initially, let George get by him, and George was on a two-stopper anyway, so he passed him. He tried to hold on to fourth, but when Carlos came out on those fresher tires, he was losing quite a bit of ground. And I'm wondering if it wasn't just the car did suffer some damage, and it
Yeah.
just started to wear. And eventually, by the time Carlos is closing in, he lost his gearbox, pulled over with a DNF.
Yeah, could well be, but he did lack pace there for a little portion of the track, but then his pace
Yeah,
came back on
it came
again,
back, right.
which doesn't lead to some kind of damage, but as we find out, it was hydraulic failure or something with the
Or
gear
water
shifts. I
leak or
mean,
something. Yeah, I don't remember.
I can't. Some of those things can kind of just eke their way in without even noticing, and the lap time just kind of gradually seeps away. So yeah, unfortunately, I think that outside pass, you definitely don't want to jump over those curbs too many times in an
No.
F1 car. It just wasn't really. It was not really an on kind of pass on the outside at that point, because you're coming up to another very tight right if you're going to stay on the outside.
Right.
And so his option was to bail out over the curb, not a good option, or to sit on the outside, where he probably would have ended up losing like 3 or 4 positions, because
Right.
once he came back to the right, he would have had to back off so much to even make the turn. Everyone would have filed past him. So probably not the best option in the world to fight to the outside of that turn, and ended up not really benefiting at all anyway.
Yeah, right. Yes, one of those racing incidents, like in Brazil.
We don't talk about Brazil.
We don't talk about Brazil. You can't talk about it. There's damn Max. So as you know, I mean, look, it did suck. I mean, in the end, it sucked for Lewis because he had a record of a win in every season he's been in F1, and that was broken on Sunday. So that sucks. I mean, that's not a great day for Lewis.
No.
But as he said, I mean, he said the last race was really indicative of his entire season at this point, and he's happy to put it behind him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Mercedes had a mediocre car this year.
Yeah.
You got to brush that off.
Yes.
And get on with it. The signs point to that they've got the head around the new rules, and they're going to come back with a good car, a competitive car next year. So
yeah,
I'm not losing sleep over Lewis Hamilton not winning a race.
No, try being Alonso.
There's a lot of people that haven't won a race in the season that deserved one, right? So yeah, it was a tough season for him, but you just got to strike it off and just come back fighting next year. That's all.
Yeah, no, I mean, he missed another title. He was beaten by his teammate. That's only happened 3 times now. Yeah. And he missed a race win during the season. So, yeah, not a fun season, but, try being Alonso. Vettel hasn't had a win. Think about, I mean, it happens to the best of them when you don't get it right. But like you said, I expect Mercedes will get on top of it.
It was nice to hear that Lewis took all the F1 drivers out and celebrated Vettel's, history and lifetime achievement, whatever you want to call it. But it was real nice.
Yeah, it
seemed
nice.
like Seb and Lewis were getting along famously there at the end. So I think Seb really appreciated what Lewis did for him there. That's got to be a hefty bill, taking the F1 guys out. With their side salads and some lemon water the day before. That's the time to take everyone out for dinner, not on Sunday night when they don't have to get up and drive the next day. That's an expensive ticket.
Yeah, I think Crofty said it. And then after the race, I saw him interviewing Lando, and Simon made some sort of comment that Lando said he had paid for it, not Lewis. I don't know if he was joking or real, but I wouldn't put it past Lando to joke about it. But I don't know if that was real, So I don't know. But Crofty said the total, and I think I divided that by 20. It was like $1,600 a head.
Wow.
It was like 30 grand or something.
That gold leaf shrimp cocktail or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Because they're not drinking a lot, so that food must have been something else.
Yeah. It's not a dinner you and I would have at a race. That'd be like barbecue, red wine from Dixie cups,
Yeah. Rat burgers at the concession there at Daytona.
At Daytona with those chips that have been stale sitting there since the beginning of last season.
Yeah.
Under that heat lamp that's like dodgy and flickering.
So that was the worst.
That was the worst. The shit Paul and I've been through, I can't tell you. It's amazing. Let's see. George also had a bit of a ragged day, as both drivers, as Toto said, cooked their tires early on. But George tried that two-stopper, got a penalty for an unsafe release, had a slow stop. George said that, the simple reality is that Brazil flattered their car. This track did not. And the slow pit stop, the penalty really put his race out of reach. So he ends up in P5 after Lewis's DNF.
Right.
So he gained a place. So there you go.
Get down.
Let's see. Let's talk about McLaren. Lando Norris, P6. Daniel Ricciardo, P9. Lando had a very good race to 6th. And once the Merc got around him, didn't have the pace to hold the Merc off, but once the Mercs got around him, he was effectively running his own lonely race at this point in 6th place. No one really close enough behind him to compete. He was best of the rest, which is a term we found out later that he hates. He hates that term. So good for you, Lando. Lando said... is interesting, Paul. He said this for him, it's a front limited circuit. He said he doesn't care what the back end of the car is doing. As long as he's got front end grip, that's what he wants. So he likes a very pointy car, right? And he can deal with the back end, but the front end, when it's front limited, he's going to struggle with tire deg. And he said he had quite a bit. So it's kind of interesting because when you ask him, we always talk about JB Jensen Button liking a little understeer, and you always talk about road cars when they're made with understeer and that sort of thing. But when you take like Vettel, when I rode with him and interviewed him, he doesn't like understeer, hates it. He said you're just waiting and waiting and waiting on it. He hates it. He likes to have a pointy car. And so does Max, and so does Lando apparently. Yeah,
and Lewis,
yes. In Lewis too. So there you go. For Dan, Paul, he tried the one stopper from 13th on the grid, made it work for points, but nearly ran out of tire at the end with Vettel right on his tailpipe. Despite the good result, McLaren still fell down a spot to P5, not best of the rest. That hurts. That's like $12-15 million in the constructors. That stings.
They needed that money to pay Ricciardo off.
Yeah, they did. And let's just be fair. It's hard to blame Lando for that because Lando outscored Dan by 85 points.
Yeah.
So
Lando did his job for sure.
Lando did his job. Yeah. So there you go. We're going to see the back of Dan Ricciardo. And Paul, I'm going to put you on the spot now.
Okay.
Will we see Dan back in an F1 car on the F1 grid?
I think so.
Yeah.
I could see him coming back in a Hulkenberg kind of way. I don't think, I think he struggles. I don't really understand his struggles, and I don't think he understands his struggles really. But obviously when he came from Red Bull, still firing on all cylinders, and it just kind of gradually went down. I still think in the right place, he'll still have the old damp, but he's just whatever the environments he's been in. I think Alpine will beat the snot out of you personally. And for whatever I thought McLaren would be a great place to go,
I did too.
But it just didn't. And Lando's probably underestimated by me and some other people. And I know a lot of people think very highly of him, but I think he's been overachieving in that car, and Daniel just didn't have the game for it. But I think, his pedigree, his history, I think if a team has a slot that needs to be filled for whatever, he would be the number one choice. At least it would be in my book.
Okay.
But whether he's going to come back and start rebuilding his career, I don't see it. But I see there's opportunities down the road as a stand-in driver or whatever at some point. Yeah.
Let's see. You talked about Alpine beating the stuffing out of people. They beat the stuffing out of Fernando. Another DNF for Alonso, Esteban Ocon in P7. Alonso was running midfield, got undercut, then retired from the race, and said that this is pretty indicative of his entire season at Alpine. So much so, Paul, and I tweeted like a little stupid meme I made, but right after the race, there was a picture posted on Twitter. He went into the Aston Martin garage, got a suitcase, his duffel bag, all his gear in his room, went out, walked down the paddock, and walked into the Aston Martin to put all of his gear into Aston Martin.
Oh my God, he was done, I guess.
Done.
Saying. Yeah, it's hard because he races with his heart on his sleeve. He throws everything out there, literally. And he's been doing it for years, which is so difficult to do year after year after year. You could suck it up like Rosberg did for a year or whatever, but he just brings it every time. And when he does that and the car lets him down so much, you can understand the frustration, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And then some of the calls from the team and the teammate situation, he needs to be the number one. He needs everyone behind him. I'm not sure if he's going to get that.
Wait till he gets a load of Lance.
Aston Martin either. But I think the good thing is I think the competition between the drivers is going to be pretty obvious, and it's in Aston Martin's best interest to back Alonso 100% of the way and help Lance as much as they can. But Alonso's a pretty good ticket to have.
Yeah, they're going to get performances out of him that they may not have gotten out of Seb. And they need to be prepared for that. And acting like Lance is your number one driver and Alonso's there to play wet nurse to your son, that dog don't hunt. That ain't going to work. I'm going to tell you right now, Lawrence, you just tell Lance to shut up and just follow Alonso around, because if he starts doing the kind of crap that he did with Seb, that ain't going to work.
No.
I'll just tell you.
Nope.
Let's see. Esteban Ocon didn't have the pace either to run too much higher to challenge Lando for 6th, so he hung in there for 7th. Did hold off a feisty Lance, speaking of, who was coming through the field, but he managed to hang on to P7 despite being Alonso limited. Esteban gave the team enough points to hold on to the best of the rest, and they scored 4th in the Constructors' Championship. A great feat by that team. You and I have been pretty critical about Alpine as a works team. Should have been higher up the grid sooner than this, but moving to 4th is a good move.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good move. It's not the move that they need to be. They're not fighting for wins. They're not fighting for championships still.
Which is where they should be.
Which is where they at least should be having a look in. I understand it's actually really difficult because that, you want to do that in the top motorsport in the world is not easy. Ferrari and Red Bull and Mercedes are not just going to move to the side or stop pushing. So it is a very difficult thing to do. But for them to get 4th in the spot when I think halfway through the season when McLaren started waking up, it looked like Alpine didn't stand a chance, but they did. They had more good races than they did bad ones, we know they've been up and down a little bit. But ultimately, with Alonso scoring points and Ocon is, even if he didn't get along with Alonso and their little rivalry, etc., Ocon still can achieve quite a lot in a car. He's a pretty darn good driver. So I think both those drivers probably got the most out of those cars throughout the season, and it was up to Alpine to give them a car when they could to get the points, and they did enough to get them enough.
I agree. And they got Alan F and Permain over there, you know, should be winning everything, Alan. No, I agree. Esteban, let me say this in English. Esteban, if he would just not wig out with his teammate deal, I get it. Nobody wants to get beat by your teammate, but pick your battles. I mean, and I'm not talking about just the incident in Brazil with Alonso. I'm talking about all that time with Sergio over at Force India and all that stuff. And I don't know. You don't have to go full Yuki on this thing. Just
no, for sure. Have some confidence in your talent
pick your battles.
And work with the team. We've said it time and time again. It's like when you're a team in that position, everyone has to be working towards the goal. You got to get rid of the rivalries and work together. And if they that the other driver scores more points and you don't that week, it's going to be your turn coming along, but you got to throw that stuff to the side because you're fighting against the people in front of you on the grid, not your teammate in the end. I understand there's always rivalry and egos and everything, but that is not the place that team can operate at.
Yeah, and I think he's got enough of a racing history in Formula One that his resume speaks for itself. He doesn't need to prove it by beating the crap out of his teammate, every time they get her in the same zip code with each other,
Right.
And I don't know that it's going to get any better with Gasly, because Gasly can be a little hot under the collar too. Yeah, I feel like that could be oil
even
and water.
Worse, I think. Yeah,
me
too.
too.
We won't understand what they're saying because they'll be shouting at each other in French. But
yeah, right. It's
going to be lots of arms in the air.
Yeah, a lot of arm waving and frustration. Let's do Aston Martin. Lance Stroll in P8, Sebastian Vettel in P10. All the focus was on Seb this weekend, but Lance quietly took his two-stopper, passed his teammate, and marched promptly all the way up to 8th place. A very spirited drive from Lance. Nice way to round out the year. So there's that. That's what he said. He said, yeah, it's a good result. Nice way to round out the year. So, there you go.
It's a quote.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do not taunt Happy Fun Lance.
No.
We'll
feed it off the midnight.
Do not feed Happy Fun Lance. Yeah, so that's what. But as I mentioned, it was a Seb-a-liscious weekend with all the feels, Paul. Had all the feels this weekend. And the team saw him off by trying a late stop, one-stopper that did not work and left him driving his heart out for a point. Had he got it right, had the team got it right, or if Seb had gotten past that wacky Ricardo on the last lap, that would have moved them up in the championship one spot ahead of Alpha and worth 12, 13, 15 million.
They were tied, right? Tied on points. Yeah.
55. Yeah. So, that would have gone a long way to paying for that massive Donka Seb parties that you guys were throwing all weekend. So, yeah, so close, right? It can be that close.
Yeah. I mean, Seb was, bemoaning the strategy. The strategy worked for Ferrari. It didn't work for him, right?
Right.
It's a shame. I mean, I think the DEG on at the end, as far as they felt they needed to go, I think the car was just losing so much pace there at the end on the older tires that it just ended up not being that way. And obviously Stroll showed it that car in particular, the two-stopper was the way to go. And,
for sure.
They at least they split strategies. And,
right.
They went for it and they got points from both cars. They just missed on that one extra point, which is a shame.
Yeah, it is. They were so close on that one.
I think if I'd pick between them and Alfa Romeo, I would say they were the better team this year. But Alfa Romeo, kudos to you.
Yeah. Kudos to Alfa Romeo. I'm going to stand up for Alfa Romeo down in 15th and 12th. No. Let's see. Speaking of an Alfa Tauri, Pierre Gasly, P14, Yuki Tsunoda in P11. Pierre started on the softs. This was an aggressive move. That didn't really work out. He ended up doing a one-stopper, which meant that he had a long road ahead of him after that first stop on that set of hards. That left him out of grip, out of the points for his last race as a member of the AlphaTauri Red Bull driver team. So not a great result for Pierre.
No, that's a shame. Yeah, the softs, he just didn't have the pace. It just wasn't enough there to gain all those positions and time. And you got to think, you just Formula One with the aero, etc. It's going to be really hard to really, gain 8 positions on the softs versus everybody else who were on the mediums or whatever. So it just kind of didn't make any sense, and it didn't really work out for him either.
Right. Yeah, it was really tough because he started on those softs, and I'm thinking maybe they thought with those softs they'd get a really good jump,
right,
and make up several positions that jump, and then try to run those softs as long as they possibly could, box, put on the hards, and run at the end. But he didn't get that great of a start. Didn't really capture that soft grip early on.
Right.
So Yeah. Let's see. Yuki started higher on the grid than Pierre did, so the possibility of points certainly was there. But he didn't have the pace to hold off the Astons in the long run. He said he did his best, the best he could out there. But to be honest with you, I don't even think he could have F-bombed those tires into more grip. I don't think that would have worked. Yuki said that he learned a lot from Pierre over their 2 years. And I'd say the biggest lesson he got from Pierre is a potty mouth, I think, maybe.
Well, I think he came in with the potty mouth.
He may have.
Yeah, he's just, it's going to be, AlphaTauri is going to have a very interesting year next year.
They are, aren't they?
Even on TV, they're talking about, now Yuki's the #1 driver. It's like, I'm pretty sure that's not going to work out like that pretty quickly.
I'm not seeing it that way. And they were like, oh, Yuki's going to be the leader, team leader. And I was like, I don't know. They're not getting a 19-year-old that's never driven an F1 car. They're getting Nick DeVries.
Yeah,
a champion. His way around an F1 car.
I think Nick's going to take over that #1 role pretty quick. I haven't seen anything out of Yuki that leads to me to believe he's a leader of any kind.
No, I don't either. Because if you were, you wouldn't be berating your team in public like that.
Yeah.
So missing the plot totally there, Yukester. Don't go full Yuki on him. Let's see who is next. Paul Williams. You got Alex Albon, P13. Nicholas Latifi. This is sad. I hate to say it. Not a way
seen
to
that
finish.
meme with Homer Simpson slowly backing into the hedge. That's Latifi saying goodbye to Formula One right there.
No, a DNF, and it wasn't his fault. Well, let's talk about Alex first. Alex didn't have the best qualifying, but he did move up the field. Another very spirited drive that's becoming kind of a hallmark for Alex, finishing up in P13, right? This is not where you expect to see a Williams car, and that's what Alex is delivering. Don't miss that, because typically the Williams have always languished back in that P17, 18, 19, 20 range, but with some modicum of regularity, Alex is up around the P10, and he's doing a great job, Paul. He really is.
He really is. It's he had a lot of pressure on him when he went zooming up into the Red Bull team. Probably wasn't ready. Not everyone's ready.
Right.
I think this is the best place for him for everything to be calm. No, the expectations aren't there either, right? So everything it does is a bonus, and that may be how we can perform better. Some people thrive on being in the spotlight. Some people thrive on being the little engine that could, and he seems
the
to
underdog.
be doing that. He gets in that car and he's up 5 positions further than you expect him to be, and he gets it there, and he's in the points sometimes, et cetera, et cetera. So he's doing a great job for Williams. Williams are very happy with what he's doing. Obviously, Latifi can't really back him up very well in pace, and so maybe with a different driver, although they're going to have another rookie next year, I'm not sure that's going to help them very much. But hopefully, Williams are working on making their car better to give Albon something to really play with.
I agree. Yost Capito is all over it. Paul, if there's any poetic reality to the season for Nicholas Latifi, it's that this was his final race and he got punted out of it by a guy who was also in his final race. And both are being let go due to a lack of results. I mean, you couldn't write that script, but that's pretty bad.
Yeah, that's going to be it's pretty sad to get knocked out. I'm sure. I mean, he wasn't having a great race. He was just he was way off. But
Latifi did.
Punted, not be able to go across the finish line in your last ever F1 race. Feel bad for the guy.
You remember how David Coulthard retired? Final race, down in Brazil.
First corner, right?
First corner out. I was like,
bye, David.
Man, it's brutal in Brazil. That was bad. Google it. Am I talking about Alfa Romeo? I am talking about.
I think
Alfa
so.
Romeo.
Yeah.
Valtteri Bottas in P15.
Bottas.
And Zhou Guanyu in P12. Valtteri started on hards. Now, like Pierre softs, this was an aggressive move. This meant, unfortunately, that he ran long and boxed last, and that dropped him well down the grid. And even with fresh rubber, he couldn't recover back up. Valtteri said, though, Haha, you may be critical of that, but he said ultimately it was all about defending their position in the Constructors' Championship. So their strategies were crafted in a completely defensive nature for the race.
By not scoring points?
By running like shit and not scoring any points. Right.
That's quite the strategy.
All planned.
That's exactly what they're not expecting.
Yeah. Yes. They're not expecting us to suck.
Yeah. We'll fool them.
How about you? So no, I think his point was they weren't doing anything stupid. They didn't feel like they had the pace, but the way that they had split the strategies and the way they were running the team, I think even Joe sort of held up the Astons from making any bigger advances than what they may have. And I think that kind of handed whatever it was in the championship.
Gotcha.
So yeah.
All went perfectly to plan, Pinky.
All went perfectly to sucky plan. Yes, that's how they want it. Joe and Albon went at it quite a bit all day, really, back and forth. And finally, he was able to put Alex behind him and march to another P12. He had a P12 in Brazil as well. He said that he also, Joe said, he had the best overtake of his career on track to boot. So good for Joe. Fred said that the last few laps were nail-biting, and they managed to hold it all together and race their way to sixth in the Constructors' Championship. Both Alfa and Aston Martin finished with 55 points in the Constructors' Championship. They both had 55 points. But Alfa got sixth, and Aston got 7. Do you know why, Paul?
Probably one of Bottas's first 3 races of the year, I'd imagine.
Bottas scored a 5th at Imola. Yep. Yeah. So they had the higher finish position than Aston Martin, and it was all down to that man that you wrote off all those many years ago, Valtteri Bottas.
So many years ago.
Yeah. To whom it may concern. So there you go. Yep. Who looked like a 1970s cop film extra with his mustache.
Yes, he looked like anything else other than a Formula One driver, I'll say you that.
I know what you're thinking. You go, I didn't recognize him without seeing his butt. Thanks, Valtteri. Remember that picture of him in the Colorado? In the river,
yes,
you know?
yes. Yeah.
That was an attractive sight. That's something that's seared in my head. I can't get out of my head. It was like Max at the German-themed spank party. I can't get that out of my head either. Just some things you shouldn't see.
No,
and those
really.
are 2 of them, really. Not giving moral equivalency to Valtteri there, but within reason. So now finally we're down to Haas. Mick Schumacher, P16, Kevin Magnussen, P17. Mick unfortunately gave Latifi a shove, got a penalty for doing so, and added to the very reason that Haas couldn't get him out of the team quick enough. Even to the point of not letting him do donuts after the race, which, let's face it, as I mentioned, was humiliating.
Yeah.
And even despite all of that, he still beat Kevin, right? And they wouldn't let him.
Theoretically, it's not like the big golden. I mean, shouldn't it be in amongst Vettel and?
I agree.
He's not of that caliber, or hasn't done enough to really.
Yeah.
Let's rejoice on his epic career. I don't.
Yeah. I agree. And when
I would have done donuts if I was him.
But. No, when I read that and then I saw it online and he's out there doing donuts and we're like, oh no, we're not doing donuts. No, bring it back. Stop it. We're not doing them. And I'm like, I get what it's shitty, but I get what they're saying.
Yeah, it's not his place to be.
You tore our cars up all year. You shouldn't be doing donuts with Vettel, Max.
Yeah.
Know your station, sort of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So there you go. That's how Haas finished. Let's do some words. We like to do those. Let's do move of the race. All right, move of the race, Paul, because I think you and I had the same.
Yeah, I'm giving it to the non-move of the race, which is not doing that double pit stop for Ferrari. I think they did an excellent job, and and Charles executed it. And as I said, it wasn't just something they came up with in the race. They worked on this thing through practice to try and get this car to be able to perform as it did. And the performance it did put in got Charles second in championship. So.
Right. No, I thought it was a great move. And I would, because everybody knows, I'm a Ferrari fan, but it was a good move and really pretty much nailed, the coffin shut there with Charles in second place. And, he needed that, I think, for him. Because, oh my gosh, think of his frustration level all year long, including, and we know Charles, including the frustration with himself and the unforced errors.
Yeah.
Right.
They all made mistakes on that team.
They all made
him,
mistakes.
So.
Yeah. And so his frustration and then the strategy and I'm kind of curious if the veneer will wear off. And we'll get into that in season review. But anyway, let's see. Next awards, Donkey of the Race.
We'll do it live.
Yeah, Paul. Donkey of the Race.
Sorry, Mick. But
Ooh.
Yeah. The only thing you could have done worse is back into Vettel when you're getting your car back after you punted Latifi out of his career in F1. So yikes. Not good. And it was an awful move as well.
It was.
It wasn't just like, it's just a racing incident. That literally could have been avoided very easily. And the ramifications. Poor Latifi didn't get to finish his race. You look like a bit of a like Haas is the geniuses for getting rid of you, honestly. So we'll see.
Yeah, it wasn't good. Let's see. I had Alpine.
Wow.
A DNF for Fernando Alonso, another one. And I know you hung in there for best of the rest, but boy, talk about cutting it. You know what I mean? I don't know. Poor Alonso. I don't blame him from grabbing all his crap and leaving. I mean, checkered flag, ghost like Swayze. He's gone.
Yeah.
I don't blame him.
I think the ramifications from the Honda years at McLaren, obviously, the frustration. Kind of builds up a wee bit.
GP2 engine.
I just need an engine that asked. I'll do the rest. That's
I know. Insane. Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, come on. But Mick's a great choice. Let's see. Drive. The race is the next one.
Get down. Get down.
Oh boy, Paul. Drive of the race. Who you
it's a tough choice, but I'm gonna go with the fan base of the world, and I'm gonna pick Vettel, and not just because it was his last race, but I actually think he had a heck of a race, and I think the strategy was the only thing that fell back from him actually getting a big boot full of points, really.
Yeah,
that was a real bummer.
It was a real bummer.
Yeah, he's been driving great, and this was just another great race. I mean, he's driving, not a great car, and he's been doing some stoic work in that car in these last few races, and this was just another example, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Some of those magic Seb moments, like,
can I go for a wee?
Remember those good ones? Or this one?
Pre-practice. It's called pre-practice. Who gives a
That was a good one. And one of our favorite, Paul.
I'm out. Crash. Somebody hit me in the rear, turn 2, and then somebody hit me in the rear again in turn 3. For sake.
That was a great one. I love that one. And this one?
There's something loose between my legs, apart from the obvious.
And the one that was controversial.
You know what? Here's the message for Charlie. Honestly.
Telling Charlie Whiting to F off. Remember that?
Yes. I remember all of them. Yeah.
And that led, Max to say...
That was a real bummer.
Oh, not that one. Sorry. This.
Really, Sebastian is crazy.
He's crazy, man.
He is a little crazy.
Oh, boy. Yeah, it was a great drive. No doubt about it.
Yep.
I think he did well. I'm going to change things up. I'm going to go with Charles. I could argue Lando, too. I think Lando had a great drive to P6. Quiet drive, as you said before the podcast. It wasn't on TV much because he was kind of on his own. Yeah. But fantastic drive in that McLaren and finishing P6. At least he tried to make an effort, for McLaren and get as many points as he can. And best of the rest was really good.
Yep. McLaren clever to lock him up.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, I think that was a good one. And like I said, I could argue Charles, too, getting second in the championship, executing the strategy, when they did the dummy call and then his race engineer radioed him. He said, "Leave me alone. I know exactly what I got to do. I got to make these tires last." And he knew it, and he knew what he had to do, and he did it. And I think the execution was there at every level for Ferrari. And this weekend, as you mentioned, pre-planned, really did their math on Friday and Saturday, and I think it worked well into Sunday, and may have caught Red Bull napping a little bit, which Hanna and team usually don't. So I think it was good. I can make that argument. Let's do some mailbag.
You've got mail.
So we only have one. I guess nobody really gives a damn what we think.
Yeah,
it could be Thanksgiving. Otherwise, people don't care.
Apart from the rest of the world, don't care. But,
yeah, right. This is Brian from Austin, and Brian from Austin cares, damn it. And Brian, thanks you for sending this email or this message on our website and our mailbag. Appreciate it very much. He said, "Hi, Todd and Paul. Do you think?" Hey, Brian, how are you? Brian, keep Austin weird. He says, "Do you think if Daniel goes to Red Bull as a reserve driver, do you think he could be a backup plan for Yuki if he doesn't pan out for the season? Love the insight from you guys as always." Well, thank you for the kind words, Brian. That's an interesting point. We talk about a reserve driver, and AlphaTauri has two junior leaguers over there, Nick DeVries, who hasn't been in a Formula One car full time, and Yuki, who seems to be, on weekend to weekend, can get a little unbalanced and out of control and F-bomb everybody. Could you see Daniel going over, becoming part of the Red Bull team, being a reserve driver for either team? And if Yuki wasn't cutting it, or Nick or whatever, could you see Daniel stepping into an AlphaTauri?
I could. I think it's a good point, and I definitely could see that. I don't see him taking DeVries' spot. I think DeVries is actually going to perform pretty well.
I do too.
I have good expectations, but Yuki's there on a wish, and I don't know if Gasly
was there on a Honda logo.
Yeah, it's tough, right? I'm not sure he's earning his stripes. His third year in Formula One. I'm not expecting anything. It's like the untapped talent is finally going to emerge from there. I just don't see it anymore. I thought maybe he had something going, but it didn't really. It just hasn't got any better. So I for sure think that Red Bull and Toast could get pretty tired of Yuki. And sit him out. Did they send him out for a race at some point, or were they talking about it in his first year?
Yeah, I remember they were talking about possibly benching him.
I can't remember if they did bench him for a race or not. But or he might earn it himself by getting penalty points. I don't know. But I could definitely see them showing Yuki, you got to ship up or shape out, and Daniel, I'm sure, would jump at the chance to get back in an F1 car. I think ultimately he's not done with Formula One, else he wouldn't be sticking around. I'm sure there would be a lot of other opportunities he could go to immediately. So he's going to be doing everything he can to try and get himself back in a car, I would say.
Yeah, I would think so too. It's a great question, Brian.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know how France puts up with the Yuki stuff. I really don't.
No.
I don't understand that, but that's just me. I don't think I would as a team boss. But anyway, that's what we think about the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. Let us know what you think about the race. You can share your opinion. Just do it to Corman Civility, as always, over at theparcferme.com. If you like this podcast, go over to iTunes, give us a good rating, or on Spreaker, or whatever you listen to this podcast on. And huge thank you to our Patreon supporters. It is... without a doubt that we could not and would not do this podcast if it were not for our Patreon supporters. So thank you so much to all of you for your support. And we are incredibly grateful for this whole season and all the support you've given us for this season to keep the Parc Fermé going. So thank you so much for doing that. Now we head into the off season, and the off season is always fun. It can be a little bit of a desert for any sort of real or meaningful F1 news, but we typically try to find some stuff and do some features and those kind of things. Like I mentioned, Paul and Grace and I are finally going to get around to doing that non-F1 related podcast. And don't worry, we will warn you at the beginning of the podcast. So if you only listen for F1 content, you don't have to listen to it. But anyway, Paul, it's been a crazy season, and I know you and I like to do a season review over the winter break and kind of go through the teams like we've just done, but do it with a view of the season, and we talk about them for the season, and so we typically like to do that, so we'll have to schedule that sometime over the next coming weeks. And and talk about it. So as we head into the holidays, I must brag on my friend and let you all know what kind of guy Paul Chorsley is. So I am sitting at home today. I have 2 dogs. I tweeted a picture of our 2 dogs, and Paul knows I have 2 dogs. And I'm sitting there, and I get a delivery. Dogs. I know. I love dogs. And there was a delivery at my house. I opened up and it says a fetch box. So I thought, what is that? And my daughter's like, Dad, what did you order? I said, I don't know. I didn't order anything. I open it up, guys. And inside this box is like 1,000 awesome dog toys. There's balls and ropes. And here on my YouTube, you'll see this and all these dog toys all in there. It's chock-a-block. And nestled in there in a bubble wrap special container for a wine bottle, he and his wife sent me and my wife a bottle of wine. So
there you go.
Delightful guy. You guys
can
Paul.
Sip on your wine as your dogs tear those toys apart.
Yeah, the more wine we drink, we might start playing with those toys.
Whoa, easy.
Well, not that way. Just here, go fetch. She'll be throwing the ball, and I'll go get it. It's a squeaky toy. Anyway, so thank you, Paul. You're
welcome.
You're a friend, and
always happy to share dog toys and alcohol. There you go. Yeah,
dog toys and alcohol doesn't get any better than that, man. That's like World Cup stuff there. So, all right, well, until we do this next week, we'll go find Grace and get her take on Abu Dhabi as always, and we'll be back soon. And until that time, this is Todd, aka Negative Camber, saying so long.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.